From the 809 Restaurant and Lounge in the heart of Inwood, New York City, welcome to Inwood Artworks On Air, where we meet the musicians, filmmakers, writers, theater makers, and artists of all stripes who make their home here in what we affectionately call Upstate Manhattan. I'm your host, Aaron Sims, and today we're turning the spotlight on dancer, choreographer, director, and visual artist Dister Rondon. Dister has danced in movies, on VH1, and in national ads for Apple, Verizon, and The Gap, and you've seen his art all over Upper Manhattan. Inside George Washington High School, for example, or at 172nd in Amsterdam in his mural thanking essential workers. In 2004, Dister created the I Love My Hood project to promote and preserve the Washington Heights he grew up in. I Love My Hood is now a worldwide collective of artists, educators, and activists dedicated to serving the greater good through hip-hop. We're going to talk to him about that and so much more, but first, Dister, welcome to Inwood Artworks On Air. It's great to see you.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Sure thing. So first things first, just check in with you and see how are you and how are you doing right now in this new normal?
Like I said before, I mean, slow motion better than no motion. So just moving along. Got no choice.
But you are moving, which is the choice you've made. Thank God. Let's start with something that I know is at the heart of everything you do, hip-hop.
Mm-hmm.
To many, hip-hop might mean just a certain music or style or dress or attitude, but I think you'd agree that by itself, that barely scratches the surface of how it informs as a cultural soundtrack and as a guide to living a life. What does hip-hop mean to you and to the neighborhood we're in right now?
Oh, man. Sounds simple, but I can give you a very layered answer. But, I mean, like you said, it is a cultural movement, probably the biggest artistic revolutions, I mean, that could even embattle the Renaissance. And being here, born and raised in Washington Heights, we are basically in the Mecca and the, ground zero of it all.
How does that inform your work? As that movement, this is a neighborhood of great diversity and of great culture. How does hip hop find itself into your style of work and the way you express yourself in your work?
Well, it doesn't necessarily find its way into my work. It is my work. It's my language. It's my, my physical vernacular. I get, asked questions like that often, and it's strange because it implies usually as if I picked it up at some point. I was born in there, It's like saying, "Hey, when did you decide to have your mom?"
Exactly. Just you've been making street art for nearly 2 decades, and not without some controversy along the way.
Mm-hmm.
Have your thoughts about street art, sanctioned or not, changed over the years?
I mean, just the term street art is kind of like...
That's changed. Urban art, or however you want to say it. Graffiti.
I mean, I definitely despise urban art. What I do is black art, black American art. Urban art is often used, whether it's malicious or not. I mean, usually people are just ignorant to the issues.
Right.
It just dismisses its root, where it comes from, So it's okay to say black. And what I do is black American art. And I see that often, urban dance and urban such and such. I'm like, ugh, it's painful to see because it just dismisses the actual, people.
Have you seen a change in black art and its relationship to the uptown community now in this COVID-19 era?
Well, because of COVID-19, a lot of businesses, companies, corporations are jumping on the wagon, trying to save face. In January, I was still sending proposals to companies saying, "Hey, I would love to paint this on your wall," and I'd either get ignored or dismissed or whatever the case is. It wouldn't happen. But because now the pressure's on, everybody wants to be part of the fight visually, or at least on the surface. But when you look up where their donations go politically, it tells a different story.
Or what their board is made up of.
Correct. Correct. And not even, I mean, we could have as many brown, black faces on those same boards. It doesn't mean that they're still not, for example, contributing to those same politicians that are perpetuating the bullshit, you know? So it's, you know, I'm always side-eyeing everything and everyone at the end of the day, so.
But it's really good to know who you're in bed with business-wise, so to speak, though, and knowing what people's intentions are, right?
Right, right. I mean, yeah, we could be in bed with, you know, the greatest of people at the end of the day who owns that house.
Well, 16 years after the start of I Love My Hood, the collective has spread its message throughout New York City. You've traveled to the Dominican Republic, UK, France, Uruguay, Puerto Rico. Am I leaving any out? These have been all over the place, right?
Yeah. I mean, I've been around a bunch of other places also. It's been fun.
Well, it's been a hard time lately for those all over fighting for racial equality and social justice. So I wonder, what role do you see I Love My Hood playing in that struggle today? It's like an uptown movement that's rooted uptown, but it's not necessarily about uptown.
Right.
It's transcended that.
Right. And that's actually the message I'm trying to put out. I Love My Hood originally started, I started as, the name was actually Peace, Love, and Merengue. So that was the first murals I was painting, that was the tagline, Peace, Love, and Merengue. But it was too niche, you know, and I didn't want to just focus on a specific culture or community. I wanted to focus on community like us, like ours, but not just Washington Heights. So it ended up evolving into I Love My Hood. So it could be I Love My Hood, Detroit, I Love My Hood, you know, Miami Beach, I Love My Hood, you know, Pau, France, wherever it is.
You've, like I said, that emanation to reach people has always been part of your brand, I think, whether it's Dister or I Love My Hood. And not only as a visual artist, you've been a dancer, a choreographer for over 2 decades. I want to touch on something that maybe people don't know about you very much, that you're also a teacher. You've taught classes at Rikers, at Broadway Dance Center, and too many studios to list. What draws you to teaching?
Well, as a dancer, I kind of just stumbled into that as a career. I don't do it professionally anymore, but when you're in that field, it kind of just naturally works itself into teaching. But in that process, I've noticed it's way too many teachers, and I use that term loosely, where they just throw out a bunch of 8 counts or a bunch of sets of steps to students that are from all over the world, predominantly Europe and Asia. And they go back home and know nothing of the culture. They're just dressing the part. And it feels strange, it feels awkward, it feels borderline insulting when, you know, you're changing your hair to look like something that has no part of your genetic makeup. So teaching was really more about, you know, not just, hey, who was the first DJ that such and such, or who was the first rapper that, you know, XYZ. It's really more about the social dynamics of hip hop, because that's what hip hop is, you know. Whether we like it or not, one of the biggest elements of hip hop culture is the actual knee on the neck of a marginalized group in neighborhoods like the Bronx, Upper Manhattan in the early 70s, you know. And when I say neighborhoods like that, because hip hop could have started in Detroit, it could have started in, you know, any kinds of those same neighborhoods just that were, again, marginalized. We just happen to be in the media capital of the world. So we ended up fortunately riding that media train and the technology wave as well. I don't know if I answered your question, but
Oh, you did, absolutely. What I think a theme that we can kind of piece together through, whether it's your dancing or it's your teaching or it's your visual art, is that it's really, I think it's very deeply rooted in cultural anthropology. Like, it's not just enough to put lines and shapes and form together. It's about, there's a root to them, and I feel like your work has this root in, like kind of what you said, going back to hip hop, going back to who you are as a person, going back to the movement of New York amplifying this movement of black art.
Mm-hmm.
Where do you think we're going to be at the end of this era? Whenever this vaccine comes, whenever this new world emerges from where we are now, and you can talk about it exponentially on a global scale, or you can just talk about it locally here in Washington Heights, whatever you feel.
This pandemic wasn't, didn't really come out of the blue. It was, it was almost predicted because, as humans on this planet, these things happen, right? Unfortunately, well, not even unfortunately, fortunately, as objectively as possible, we deserved everything we got and then some as Americans, unfortunately, black and brown people are part of that, even though they don't deserve it. But it's opened the curtain to what white America really is. It's not about some random guy yelling the N-word at someone else. It's really about how indifferent legislation can be or is when it comes to morality or other humans, and like, I've said it before, we can have a black president, we can have 1,000 congressmen that look like me, but again, who owns the house, right? So regarding COVID and what's going to happen next, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if we're going to see a civil war. I mean, people of color have been fighting a war since day one. We've been fighting this war, and I tell my own kids, 6 and 9 years old, this is war. We're fighting a war. We just either don't have the tools to really defend ourselves properly, but we're scraping away at whatever we can. And it really just translates into survival. But yeah, it's waking some people up. But it's again, being as objective as possible, we definitely deserve it.
What tools, could you be more specific, were you referring to?
I mean, obviously, political tools, any kind of resources. Because our racial issues or racism isn't about, the person's skin color. It's really about power. So there's a specific group that wants to hold on to that power at any cost. Doesn't matter who gets hurt in the process, who suffers immensely in the process. It's happening now. I mean, we have kids being ripped away from their parents, and our entire government is shrugging their shoulders at it. So yeah, we don't have the tools to really, hey, we can't do that. That's not right. Let's put an end to that. As much as I love seeing people fight the good fight, either through protest or in any form, it's a bit disheartening knowing that nothing's going to happen.
This goes back to the census, as people have been speculating they're saying by 2050 the majority will be black and brown people in the United States.
45.
45 now?
Yeah.
They've amped it up, huh?
Yeah. Just got to have more kids.
There you go. There's a message here, kid. Go get more kids. So with that becoming the majority, do you feel like it's only, for those who are listening in the time capsule version of this podcast, 40 years from now, whatever, this is 2020. And that's 25 years from now.
That's not a long time.
It's not a long time in the history of the world.
It's not a long time. I mean, even when we look back and we talk about certain issues such as voting rights, we tend to think of back in the days, black and white, and it's like, I can't remember the year. Was it 53 years ago that I believe women were allowed to vote? I might be mistaken, but either way, it wasn't a long time ago. And we need to remember how close that is to now. And that's the scary part. Where, there are people alive today that couldn't vote when, at that time. So it's not that far along. And then moving forward, like you mentioned, in 2050, 2045, that majority shift, I believe that's what people are really scared of.
So do you think perhaps now, trying to see the silver lining, so to speak, of COVID, the pandemic and however it lasts, that yes, maybe people now are, as good intentions as they may be, putting focus on bringing more people of color onto their boards, hiring more people of color who are artists or their administrative staff or whatever. However it's serving, they're trying to meet a quota for a grant, or if they're doing lip service for media, or they're actually being very truthful and they actually believe in it, because let's not be entirely jaded about it. There are some people out there who are actually in companies that do want to help people. Perhaps you see this may be a foundation for that time then in 25 years?
I guess I'm a pessimist at thinking about it, because how much more evidence do we need? How much more evidence do we need that, especially as Americans, that we've really screwed this up? And I say we loosely. It's not all of us. So look how long we have here and what our track record is with, domestically, and what we've done to the rest of the world. So to say, this is, this will bring the best out of us. Really? It's going to bring the best out of us? Come on. This has taken people to one of the two extremes. Either people are like, holy crap, this is happening in this country, or people are they're going to double down, and, masks are just another way for Bill Gates to control us,
So what is your message to those people who are in those positions of power, who have an actual, we'll just say, hand on the steering wheel, so to speak, and driving us into the right direction? Like if you had an alleyway to them to say, a direct message to them saying, this is what we need to help steer us away from crazy town, and to put us back on a track towards, I'll just use the word equality, even though I think that term has been bastardized recently. But because there's no utopian vision, right? Everyone has these great high ideas of what they think this end of the rainbow pot of gold thing is, and
right.
it doesn't exist.
Like a black and white kid holding hands around the globe.
Yes, it's hands across America, across the globe, and that's just not feasible, right? So, but if there is, if there is a, so to speak, message in a bottle that someone opens at the end of the beach kind of thing that actually does get through the ocean, like what is that?
I'm not really about message. I'd rather hit them with the bottle. That's honestly how I feel.
So if I can translate personally, that's change, right? You want to evoke change, right? Who doesn't?
It's change. It's reparations. There's just so much, because we're in a society where we have the luxury and privilege, myself included, to change the channel if we don't like seeing something, to, do a podcast for fun, to go paint a mural, whatever the subject matter may be. But there are people suffering, and it's just amazing that we're in. I live in Manhattan. We live in Manhattan.
We're very fortunate.
And I guess before the pandemic, I've crossed paths. This is one of the greatest things about New York that I love, that we can walk by, people that of so many different paths, right? And those, including people that like you mentioned, are hands on the steering wheel, very, very powerful people. And yet, in around that same corner, there's people, with severe mental health issues that are being shunned in our society. So, circling back into my art specifically, I would love to address all those issues in my art, but every time I try to do that, the NYPD goes and paints over it, or, the store owner doesn't want to shake the boat, So it's like, I've been bottlenecked to do, happy little cartoons, and it wasn't until recently where I'm like, the fuck?
Well, Dister, there's so much of what you do that we didn't get a chance to talk about.
Mm-hmm.
Is there anything specifically you want to talk about? Anything that we haven't covered?
Fuck the police.
There you go. Where can our listeners go to find more about your work and your coming projects?
Either ilovemyhood.com or disternyc.com. A portion of every sale of merchandise goes towards actual communities within our neighborhoods, whether it's another local artist or another vendor, whatever the case is. Keep the money inside.
Very cool. Well, listeners, you can find those links on our Inwood Artworks On Air webpage. I want to thank Dister so much.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
You bet. For joining me here on this Artist Spotlight episode of Inwood Artworks On Air, where we meet the musicians, filmmakers, writers, theater makers, and artists of all stripes who make their home here in Upper Manhattan. If you have a moment, please show us some love right now by rating and reviewing this podcast on Apple Podcasts. It really helps. And deep thanks to 809 Restaurant and Lounge here in NYC for hosting us, and to heightsites.com for local uptown promotional support. Support your local businesses, y'all. Everybody needs love, and so please help those mom and pops out there. Be sure to follow us on social media at Inwood Artworks to keep up with all that we do, including the Inwood Film Festival, Filmmakers Al Fresco, pop-up art galleries, live performances, and so much more. You can support On Air and all our programming making a tax-free donation at inwoodartworks.nyc/donate. Inwood Artworks On Air is made possible with funding from NYC and Company Foundation, with support from Manhattan Borough President Gail Brewer and the NYSCA Electronic Media and Film Grant Program in partnership with Wave Farm Media Arts Assistance Fund, and the support of Governor Andrew Cuomo and the State of New York Legislature. Thank you so much for tuning in. This is Aaron Sims for Inwood Artworks On Air.